Whoever warned about working with children and animals might have just as well thrown in close family members for good measure. Working alongside your nearest and dearest can be a risky business. All too often, intergenerational and sibling rivalry intensifies into full-scale war, tearing families and viable businesses apart. But as Tim Lee reports from Victoria's Gippsland, it doesn't have to be that way.
The world is full of tales of family feuds and falling outs, of loved ones wrenched apart at work because of work. Farming with its unpredictable seasons, fluctuating returns, and the passion of its practitioners can be especially prone to pitfalls. So is there a blueprint for a harmonious family business? Well, you'd be hard-pressed to find a better example of a close-knit and cooperative clan than the Ingram family.
We never set out with a goal of acreage or production or anything like that. We never set out that. And when we look back now and see what's happened, it is quite amazing what's happened in such a really short time, I suppose. We all love doing what we're doing, and it's just one of those things. It's just like Topsy, she just grew. Yeah.
The Ingrams are vegetable growers on the renowned fertile soil of the Mitchell Valley in East Gippsland in Victoria's east. Like most successful family enterprises, this one is built on solid foundations. Some of this rich alluvial soil is 5 metres deep.
It's beautiful soil.
Well, it's pricey, but when you get really good land is cheap, really. Although we've paid a lot of money for some of it. But what you can do with it, that's the point. You can do anything with that country.
And it's true. The Ingram family has done a great deal with it. Trading as Bon Accord, it's now one of the nation's largest and most successful family farming enterprises. At the head of the family are Max and Kath Ingram. Now in their 80s, they have 5 sons, 4 of whom, with their wives, work in the business.
They always wanted to be farmers. The 2 younger ones, well, they were destined to be the same, I think. The middle boy, no way. So he went to Canberra and bought earth-moving equipment, and yeah, that's what he did.
So how do you keep 4 sons on the farm? For a start, ensure everyone likes their job.
Hey, pal, how you going?
Ross does the office work on the trucks. Keith and his wife, Carmel, basically run the packing shed. Gerald does the harvesting machine, planting and so on. And Murray does the cattle, the loosen, and basically the tractors.
Just evolved and happened. It hasn't been sort of pushed in any one direction, that's what you've got to do. We've just sort of had a passion for it and just done it.
We get along. Mum bashed our heads together enough when we were young fellas to sort of not argue with one another. A lot of people say that, why don't you argue more with your brothers? Well, I think it's what Mum and Dad taught us, You get further if you're looking after your brothers rather than knocking heads with them.
The spirit of cooperation was instilled at an early age.
I've always felt that when the children are small is where it all starts. They're never in competition with each other, and they never were allowed to count, well, he got 2 biscuits and I got 1, or anything like that. And it still applies today. They know that if one has a holiday at this time of the year, there's a reason for it, and they sort it out. And their wives are exactly the same. They never say, well, they got more holiday than I got, or anything like that.
All too often in a family business, it gets messy when in-laws get involved. But not in this case.
Because we're all living fairly close together, they do communicate very well, and they talk to each other what's going on and what their future plans are and what they'd like to do and how things have been going and which agents they should be using or not using and what their direction is.
This is going to make a big difference to us in August and September,
Yeah, well, some of this is only 40%.
They meet up home a few nights a week anyway and talk over the business They'll always discuss what they're doing, if they're buying tractors or whatever it may be, and they have to make decisions on their own, but they always make good decisions, and the other boys back them, and so do we, because they do make good decisions.
Such as buying this newly imported French-made bean harvester, an investment that's already paying off. Beans are one of Bonacord's staple crops.
Certainly improved our efficiency. A lot cleaner sample back into the shed.
The packing shed is a hive of activity year-round, processing and packaging a range of crops for themselves and for some other growers.
We work in acres. We own and lease about 2,000 acres here in the valley and a little bit on the hill country. We're growing about 550 acres of sweet corn, 750 acres of beans, about 800 acres of broccoli, 400 acres of carrots, 200 acres of cauliflowers, 80, 90 acres of onions. And then we do smaller things like we grow a few pumpkins and we grow some capsicums and chilies and things like that as well on the side, just to keep things interesting as a bit of a challenge.
And horticulture is full of challenges. While this district hasn't been hit by the flooding that has hit so many other horticultural regions across Australia, the exceptionally wet season has brought its own set of problems. A wet and humid summer has played havoc with crops prone to mould, such as beans, broccoli and cabbages.
You can imagine like looking into a crystal ball, but it's always pretty cloudy most of the time, subject to weather and everything else. So, but yeah, we try our best anyway.
Good and bad vegetable growing is basically about weather. You get good vegetables with good weather and bad vegetables with bad weather, but you make your money at somebody else's misfortune. When the droughts come through here and we ran out of water, there was other farmers prospered from that.
Horticultural crops are freighted up and down the eastern seaboard, according to the growing seasons.
The majority of it lands in Sydney. It's normally transshipped on from there to Brisbane if it has to go there, or otherwise it can go to Adelaide or down to Melbourne.
As the Ingram enterprise grew, so too did the need for reliable logistics.
Everything seems to happen often because we're forced to have it happen. With our first trucks, we had somebody actually just say they weren't carting anymore, so we had to buy our own truck, and then that sort of evolved.
And so was born the transport arm of the business.
Opportunities arise, so you have to take them when they're there.
Probably, 7 or 8 loaded out of the farm here most days through the week, and then other produce comes in from other growers and stuff like that, so it's a fairly hectic sort of a place to be.
Every time they might make a comment that we're not going to grow anymore, we're going to consolidate and just work on what we've got and try to stabilise. It doesn't work that way. Another piece of land comes up for sale, and it's just not always the right timing, but the right opportunity to go ahead and buy that.
A little over 50 years ago, Max and Kath Ingram moved to the district from Timbarra, a remote high country hamlet where they milk cows. Their young family needed schooling, and the climate of the Mitchell Valley was much kinder to livestock. But they'd paid too much for their land, said some local doomsayers.
Somebody said, "Oh, that's too much,
Never see your money again."
They said, "He won't last, they won't last there." But we're still here.
The family initially grew beans as a winter fodder crop. The cows got the shove when Ross and Keith came home to farm. They soon faced some big challenges.
When they first started, I think interest rates were something like 22%. And we thought, well, if they can make a go of it at interest rates like that, we haven't got much to worry about, have we?
Then there have been floods.
Yeah, we've had 3 1-in-100-year floods in the last 17 or 18 years.
And droughts that stopped their irrigation water from the Mitchell River and slashed their crop production.
Water security is the biggest issue here, and that's probably put a handicap on us for quite a few years.
At one stage, there was a 6 weeks total ban in the hot part of the year. We lost a lot of money on that. it would be hard to estimate the crops that we lost because we couldn't water. And that gives us the incentive to start thinking about dams. And undoubtedly the dams now are a marvellous asset.
And by far the family's most expensive investment. This massive dam holds 700 megalitres and took 5 years to research and construct. Kath Ingram built and installed the maze of underground pipes that feeds water around the farm. The water is of drinking standard, meaning cleaner produce in the paddock and the packing shed.
But now we find ourselves in a situation where if we do get a bad drought, well, we've only got half the water we really need anyway, so because of our expansion. So.
All up at the moment, we'd have in the mid 250 people here with the transport side of the business as well as the on-farm staff, yeah. So it's a fair few numbers.
In recent times, a move to contract labour means greater flexibility, productivity and efficiency.
We have an issue with getting rid of a lot of our waste product from out of the shed. So you're talking about the tips and the butts of the sweet corn cobs, you're talking about waste carrots and things like that. So if we were to dump them somewhere, obviously you'd have a pile as high as the MCG. So what we actually do is buy store cattle out of the Bensdale market. The boys were all fairly keen to sort of get a few more cattle. We want to get a bit more country where we can feed on a few more steers.
The Bonaccord farm is a complex checkerboard of crops and crop rotations.
The cabbage and carrots, it continues 12 months of the year for us, and the broccoli. We only just have our 2 summer crops with the beans and corn, just are extra, and onions as well. We've started our onion harvest, started picking up onions. We've got all our storage onions yet to come in. Once this weather starts to clear and dry up, so we'll start picking up those.
We've probably got about a dozen or so varieties that are in the pipeline all the time, small trials, 3 rows here, 2 rows there. Just try them at different times of the year.
Some succeed, some fail. Some, like this European cabbage variety, has promise.
It's something that we have to grow to shorten our risk up. If we had a rain event or something like we've seen in the rest of the state this year so far, we could have had problems with, you know, the other varieties of cabbage. So we've got a cabbage variety here that's up off the ground. It's